Before he became the world's most wanted terrorist, before he led Al-Qaeda, before 9/11, Osama bin Laden was just a boy. But how does a child from one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia grow up to wage war against the West? Today, we're diving deep into the untold story of Osama bin Laden's childhood, his early influences, and the events that shaped his radical ideology. Osama bin Laden was born in 1957 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, into one of the most powerful and privileged families in the Middle East. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, was a billionaire construction magnate, personally connected to the Saudi royal family. The bin Laden group built mosques, palaces, and even parts of Mecca. The family had everything: wealth, power, influence. But Osama's upbringing was far from ordinary. Osama was the 17th of at least 52 children. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, had multiple wives and was known to be strict, deeply religious, and intensely disciplined. He expected obedience, hard work, and absolute devotion to Islam. Osama's mother, Hamida, was of Syrian descent and had a different status from the other wives. Some even referred to her as the slave wife. This meant that young Osama grew up somewhat isolated, often feeling like an outsider within his own family. Despite his family's wealth, Osama's childhood wasn't filled with luxury in the way you might imagine. While other elite children studied abroad in Europe or America, Osama was sent to a conservative Islamic school in Jeddah, where he was immersed in strict Wahhabi teachings, an ultra-conservative interpretation of Islam. His teachers emphasized jihad, religious purity, and the idea that Islam was under constant threat from the West. By the time he was a teenager, he had already begun idolizing historical Islamic warriors, particularly those who fought against Western imperialism. This was a critical turning point. While most wealthy Saudi youths were living privileged lives, Osama was developing a worldview centered around conflict and religious duty. Osama wasn't just a quiet student memorizing religious texts. He was deeply engaged in political and ideological discussions. Friends described him as reserved but extremely serious. Unlike other rich kids who indulged in Western luxuries, he rejected modern entertainment, avoided music, and preferred studying religious doctrine. His strict discipline made him stand out even among his peers. He also had an unusual obsession with physical hardship. As a teenager, he would go on long desert hikes, refusing to eat or drink for extended periods to prepare for the struggles of a true jihadist. He believed that suffering made a man stronger. These early experiences laid the foundation for the extreme ideology he would later adopt. But there was one event that changed everything: his father's sudden death in 1967. Mohammed bin Laden was killed in a plane crash when Osama was just 10 years old. This loss was more than just a personal tragedy. It meant Osama lost the man who had set strict rules for his life, and at the same time, he inherited a massive fortune. While some of his siblings used their wealth to invest in business or live lavishly, Osama took a different path. Instead of embracing the world of money and power, he withdrew further into religion. By the time he was in his early 20s, he had already started funding Islamist movements, and when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, he saw it as his divine calling. Osama bin Laden wasn't born a terrorist. He was born into wealth, into privilege, into a family that had every opportunity for success. But the mix of extreme religious teachings, a strict and isolated childhood, and the trauma of losing his father created a man who saw violence as a religious duty. His childhood wasn't an excuse for what he would go on to do, but it was the foundation that shaped the terrorist he became. And this is just the beginning of his story. If you want to dive deeper into how he built Al-Qaeda, and became the mastermind behind some of the deadliest attacks in history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let me know in the comments, do you think Osama's upbringing made his future inevitable? Or was there a point where he could have chosen a different path? Let's talk about it. If you found this video insightful, give it a like. And if you're interested in more deep dives into history, geopolitics, and the figures who shaped our world, check out my other videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.